So, with any luck, we might get the second slide.
In progress.
Oh,
I'm just going to come off the phone.
okay. No, it's frozen again. I don't believe this.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, we're getting an echo from you, Pam. It's quite
I
exciting.
know, sorry.
Okay, it's all right. I'm just waiting for my computer to settle down. It's frozen. It's one of those days. Come on. I don't know what it's doing. Right here. Nope, it's frozen again. Oh, there. No. Okay, I might have to restart. Here we go. Yay. Okay, right, Julian, over to you.
Okay. Behaaloscha in a nutshell. The name of the Parsha Behaaloscha means when you ascend, and it is found in Numbers 8:2. Aaron is commanded to raise light in the lamps of the menorah, and the tribe of Levi is initiated into the service in the sanctuary. A second Passover is instituted in response to the petition, "Why should we be deprived?" by a group of Jews who were unable to bring the Passover offering in its appointed time because they were ritually impure. God instructs Moses on the procedures for Israel's journeys and encampments in the desert, and the people journey in formation from Mount Sinai, where they had been camped for nearly a year. The people are dissatisfied with their bread from heaven, the manna, and demand that Moses supply them with meat. Moses appoints 70 elders, to whom he imparts of his spirit, to assist him in the burden of governing the people. Miriam speaks negatively of Moses and is punished with leprosy. Moses prays for her healing, and the entire community waits 7 days for her recovery.
Right, of course, it's not leprosy, it's saras, which is not quite the same thing. Okay, so I think we previously did a share where we looked at Moshe when he says to God, please kill me now. And his sort of, and we spoke about other leaders that said, take my life, right? Elijah and I think Jonah, Jeremiah at one time. We're going to touch on that quote, though it's a slightly different topic. So the topic is, we're going to look at particularly this phrase that Moshe used at one point where he says, am I a mother that has to bear them in my, basically nurse them? Like, how much do we need babying and nannying by Moshe in the story, right? We've had drama at Sinai, we've had the golden calf, the building of the Mishkan, and we've had books and books of purity and holiness in Vayikra, right? And we get to Bamidbar, what's the first thing the people do? Anyone?
Complain.
Right, what do they complain about?
Manna.
Food, right? Jews always complaining about food, always talking about food. Right, let's see the quote. Who would like to read?
I will.
Go on, Pam.
Who will give us meat to eat? We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost, the cucumbers and the melons, and the leeks, and the onions, and the garlic. But now our throats are dry. There is nothing at all but this manna to look at.
Right, it's a perennial problem of the Jewish people. I don't know if anyone remembers during COVID, people were saying like, oh, it's a bit like the shtetl, where you had to queue up for days for food, and people kind of romanticized the shtetl. The shtetl had high rates of pogroms, of child illness and infant death, and general poverty. It wasn't. There were obviously aspects of it that were very very Hamish. But it's people always remember what they want to remember. Oh, Egypt, it was so good. We had all this food. Yeah, you're also slaves. It's enough to make anyone frustrated. If anyone's ever had to deal with someone complaining about something, you have a nice event. Always remember somebody who said they invite someone to bar mitzvah, and afterwards the person wouldn't stop moaning that they were put sitting next to the door in a draft. And I said, I don't understand. You're offering them a free meal. Like you'd think they'd be a little gracious. Just so don't invite them to the next one. So it's enough to wind anyone up, to be honest. If anyone's ever had to deal with complaining people, particularly Jewish complainers, what does Moshe say to God in response to this complaining? Let's have a look. Beryl, no, Beryl, you can't see. Lisa, you with us? Do you want to read or you?
No,
No. Okay, so back to you, Julian.
I can't. I can't see anything.
Oh, sorry.
Hi.
Right. Lisa, are you with us?
Yeah, I am.
Do you want to read?
Sure. Why have you treated your servant so badly? Why have I found it to favor in your sight that you lay all the burden of this people upon me? Was it I who conceived all this people? Was it I who gave birth to them all, that you should say to me, carry them in your lap as a nursemaid carries a baby? I cannot bear all this people alone. The burden is too heavy for me. If this is how you treat me, kill me now. I have found favor in your sight, and let me not see my own misery.
Right. So we've quoted this bit before. We talked about mental health before. This is not the topic today, but um, it's something. It's a throwaway remark that people often say, which is probably very insensitive now, particularly with our understanding of suicide and self-harm. But people say, "Kill me now," right? Like the old joke about the rabbi, the chazan, and the shamus, right? And the rabbi says he wants to give the sermon, and the chazan says he wants to sing Kol Nidre, and the shamus says, "Kill me now," right? It's something people say. Amazingly, that exact quote appears in the Torah. Moshe says, if this is how it's going to be, you may as well kill me now. Like, I've lost the will to live, basically. But the curious thing is this. What does Moshe say to Hashem? He says, why have you treated me so badly? Why am I so, basically hated by you that you put all this pressure on me of these people? By the way, the same people that he defended and argued and said, take my name out of your book, right? But, having established that the people are not going to be destroyed, he now proceeds to have a rant. And he says this quote. You might think the most interesting part of this quote is the end where he says, kill me now. Like, I feel like dying. As we've discussed previously, Elijah, Jeremiah, Jonah all had experiences like that. But there's another thing in this quote, which is quite fascinating, right? You see, we've got in quotes there. He says to Hashem, was I the one who gave birth to them? Are they my people? Right, so it's conversation. Yeah, I always say it's like two parents, and one says to the other, your daughter's misbehaving. The other one says, no, your daughter's misbehaving, right? We're very quick to blame. So he says to Hashem, your people, they're your people. Did I give birth to them? That you should say to me, carry them in your lap, just like a nursemaid carries a baby. Now, question for you. Where in the Torah does God say to Moshe, carry them in your lap as a nursemaid carries a baby? It's a trick question.
Nowhere.
He doesn't actually appear, right? The way it's worded is you would think Hashem came to him and said, you must carry these people and basically nurse them and baby them, right? And if you think that sounds ridiculous, think about how, often we talk about the nanny state. In America, it's a big thing. Like in New York City, they banned huge, like giant fizzy drinks because of obesity, and people say, why are you interfering in my life? And, it sort of, interventionist type leadership and policies. In Judaism, we do have interventionist things. A lot of things we do, right? We're not allowed to touch things on Shabbos and Muktzah because you might come to use them. So we absolutely nanny and baby people. But it's interesting that and anyone who's ever been a teacher, anyone who's ever been on a shul council or a warden will know that sometimes you end up adults behave like children, and you have to baby them. So, but God didn't actually say that to him. What did God say to him? He said, lead the people. He didn't tell him how. He never said to him, lead them in this way or that way, right? We know Moshe was chosen. He was a shepherd. He was a humble person. But this perception that, I have to put them on my lap and treat them like babies, I have to like really, really, this is too much for me, like the codependency, whatever you want to call it. God never said that to him. This is his perception, interestingly. Right? His perception is these people are too much. I have to baby them. Hashem never said baby them. Who gave Moshe a tutorial in leadership? Who warned him about what's happening now with this burnout?
Yitro.
Right. Let's see what Yitro said to him. You may recall. I think back to you, Pam.
Right.
No, wait. Who
What
just
do
read?
you? What?
Yeah.
It's my turn.
Yeah.
What you are, I think, what you are
Yeah.
doing is not good. You will be worn away, and this people along with you. It is too heavy a burden for you. You cannot
Right.
carry it alone.
You may recall that Moshe would see everyone, right? Everyone would come to him. He would deal with everything. He would adjudicate disputes. He would deal with shilas. He would basically now that it, it's a bit like I don't know. Let's say you had someone who's a really good pastoral figure, who's always got time for everyone, who always has time, always answers the phone, and then that person becomes chief rabbi. And I would imagine this is probably a problem for chief rabbis, that you want to continue to have those meaningful individual pastoral relationships with people, but you probably don't have the same amount of time that you had previously because you've got loads of other things you have to do. So you have to delegate. You just have to delegate, right? Or a teacher. I mean, it's interesting. Some teachers, when they move into sort of senior management, don't enjoy it because they stop teaching. They teach less and they're doing more paperwork. And head teachers, a lot of them don't teach. And if a head teacher would say, but I also want to be here for every single one of my pupils, you might say, yeah, but the thing is, you're the head teacher now. You have to have deputy heads and pastoral heads and so on. So Moshe, it's a great sentiment to be everybody's friend and everybody's listening ear, but you can't do it. It's too much for you. And what happens, of course, then is that he gets a team of elders and he distributes some of the load. Where does that burnout happen previously? It's just after Yisro leaves in that Sedra. We have a similar thing in Parshas Chukas, which is coming up in a few weeks. Miriam dies. Then we have the scene at Meribah, right, where the well has dried out and the people want water, and Moshe loses his temper and strikes the rock, which costs him his entry to the promised land. Seems like there's a pattern here, which is that when he loses his support, he panics a little bit. So in that case, it's Yisra. In this case, it's Miriam. Sorry, later on, it's Miriam. Anyway, back to this. So when he says, am I a nursemaid that has to carry these people and basically suckle them effectively, like baby them, that seems to be his perception of things. Right? Nowhere does Hashem tell him that that's his job. Obviously, he feels responsible. Right? He wasn't a man of words, we know, right? He didn't even speak. He had a speech impediment. He wasn't a great orator, right? Aaron was able to talk to people. Miriam also possibly. Kalev got them to calm down after the spies. Moshe wasn't the one to motivational speaker, to get the crowds going. He was somebody who was much more of a pastoral person, and maybe that's the problem. He wasn't a great orator and sort of inspirational figure, figurehead. He was a simple shepherd who cared for every person. So it would be natural. His perception of leadership would be that I basically have to baby these people. I have to clean up after them. I have to be their mother and their father. Because it's his perception. Hashem never said that to him, right? And most people who lead the number of people that Moshe leads don't lead in that way. You delegate, or you have to, of course, get people to eventually be able to stand on their own 2 feet. So it's a curious one. It's very telling. Again, going back, was I the one who gave birth to them that you should say to me, put them in your lap as a nursemaid carries a baby? Right? It's a straw man. Hashem never said that to him. That was clearly his perception of how his role was. Was it wrong? It's wrong, but it's very exhausting. Right? That's probably why he gets so exhausted. Right? It's very exhausting when you have to do everything for people. Yes? We had a brief discussion about the minyan this morning because we didn't get to minyan, and I commented there has to be a collective responsibility. It's my own fault. I've created it for myself because I make the calls and I nudge people, and I've never asked anyone else to do it really. People do it like for Shabbos mincha and things, and by and large it works, but it's quite a burden. So I said to Julian and Jeff and Graham this morning, we have to persuade the warden team to feel that responsibility as well. But it's probably my own fault because I get on with it. What I should do is say, right, guys, you have to do this together, or you're on your own even sometimes. Right? We know that. You remember what's the story? Oh, I can't remember what it's called. Angels. No, not Angels. I'm sure I've read it before. A guy called Jay Litvin. He's not alive, unfortunately, anymore. He wrote a wonderful article about the first time his son crossed the road on his own. It was in Chicago, which is a very busy city. I'm sure I've quoted this before, and he writes about how they taught him how to cross the road, and it was the very first time he was allowed to come home from school on his own. And he was parked in his car around the corner watching him, and he was trying to resist the urge to run out and grab him from the traffic because he was convinced he was going to get hit by a car. And he says angels were watching his son that day, and basically writes about how he had to let go. Basically, he had to let him find his own way. And I'm sure a lot of us can relate to that in different ways, whether it's children or students or people at work. It's often very hard to let go. Codependency is a very normal thing. Whereas parents, when we realize that our kids can stand on their own 2 feet and manage just fine without us, it's both a moment of great pride and a moment of grief, I suppose, because you don't have that role anymore when you realize that they're actually doing okay. So it seems like Moshe was a little bit perhaps over nannying, over interventionist. I don't know. Which is why God tells him this week's Parsha to gather a team of 70 leaders to share the burdens, right? So even though Yisro told him to do it ages ago, the fact is he doesn't seem to have cured himself of this. And the very way he describes himself to Hashem is that A, he feels like he's shouldering the whole burden, and B, he's a very, it's infantil, what's the word? Infantilizing? Is that the word? Infantilizing the people. The question then becomes how much of it is the leader's fault? If the leader acts like a parent to adults, then they're never going to grow up, are they? They're never going to develop their own skills. Right? The whole golden calf is very telling in itself. Right? We need a Moshe to lead us. We need our Moshe because he's not here. We're going to build the calf. 1 second. Are you not adults? Can you not manage without? Anybody know the song As the Rebbe Lacht in Yiddish? As the Rebbe lacht, lachen alle Hasidim. I think I'm singing it right. So basically, as the Rebbe laughs, the Hasidim laugh. As the Rebbe dances, the Hasidim dance. Right? As the Rebbe sings, the Hasidim sing. So no one seems to know if the original was supposed to be a parody of these silly Hasidim. They just do whatever the Rebbe does, or it was praising their dedication. That, wow, look at these Hasidim, they do whatever the Rebbe does, right? So it could be interpreted both ways. So these people, they said that their Rebbe Moshe has disappeared up the mountain, and they're basically bereft. And they're so bereft that they actually managed to go and serve idols. It's slightly absurd when you think about it. Nowadays we manage just fine. But maybe they were just very, in that sense, almost like infants. But how much of it's down to how Moshe sees them? It's an interesting question. We do it all the time, by the way. Communities appoint rabbis. I don't think this is Lashon Hara. When I was in Birmingham, Rabbi Rapport was there. He doesn't drive. Right? It's quite difficult to visit people when you don't drive. It's not impossible, it's quite difficult. And people will just say, oh, the rabbi doesn't drive. How is he supposed to visit people? Oh, but he's such a great learned scholar, right? So they appointed him for his, by the way, he has very good pastoral skills as well. They appointed him for his great scholarship because we're a community that needs a great scholarly rabbi to sit and study for us so that we don't have to do it ourselves. I'm not saying that was necessarily the consideration. We've come across this with the Pirkei Avos as well. Often shuls will appoint someone who they see as a great orator or a great, very, very learned person because that's the kind of people we are. We need a leader like that, right? We don't have to do anything, but we need somebody who can do this for us. It's a common mistake, right? I'm sure it happens in other areas as well. People appoint leaders or whatever. It doesn't work though, right? Everyone has to share the burden. It doesn't work. So you can't put everything on Moshe here. But how much of it is down to him himself is an interesting question, his perception of things. And we have it other times. We know that the Torah says that there'll come a time when you will want to appoint a king to be like the other nations. Right? We know it took, I think, 600 years before they actually appointed a king, something like that. So the question is, why didn't they do it straight away? So a lot of and also, as we know from Tanakh, when they did have kings, it was usually a disaster many times. So many of the commentaries say that if you look at the Torah, it says, we've learned this before, you will surely appoint yourselves a king like the other nations. It's basically a dig. It's saying you'll want a king because you want to be like all the other nations. And Hashem's saying, if you're going to appoint a king already, you shouldn't have too many wives and too many horses, and he has to carry a Sefer Torah with him. But I'm not crazy about the idea. There is a lot of the commentaries suggest that that's the understanding of it. There's a mitzvah to appoint a king in a certain way if you choose to appoint a king. In the days of Shmuel, they thought, all our problems will be if we have a king, right? And Shmuel says to them, it's not going to work that way. And they find Saul, and we know it says Saul was head and shoulders above everyone else. Right? He was a big towering person. They thought he was going to be a great king, and it didn't work out so well. So, when we put too much upon the leaders, Judaism was never about that. Judaism was about autonomy, right? Whoops, individual responsibility. The Maccabees, right? They were successful for a period of time, but the office of the Kohen Gadol became politicized. The nation eventually fell to the Romans, and then you had Rabbi Akiva, right? He saw Bar Kokhba as being a great man, a great leader, and the result was a tragedy as well. So it seems like in history, when we put too much on the leaders, it doesn't work so well. It doesn't work so well at all. Rabbi Sachs quotes, I think it was the Lubavitcher Rebbe, always said, a good leader creates leaders, a great leader creates followers. Sorry, good leader creates followers, a great leader creates leaders, right? So it's easy to critique Moshe from a distance, but the impression we get is that his perception is very much that he has to be a mother and father to the people. So actually, it's not the model of leadership. The model of leadership is you have to teach them to stand on their own 2 feet. We read Mishpacha magazine, which is aimed at the more frum crowd. So somebody wrote in this week saying, my children are never happy. They get up in the morning and they want cinnamon toast for breakfast, so I make cinnamon toast for them. And this one wants waffles, so I make waffles for them. And I cater to their every need, and they're still not happy. And I don't understand why. And the response from the social worker or the psychologist was, well, for starters, stop trying to please them so much and maybe put down some boundaries for them, right? Right? At some point, our kids have to learn to stand on their own 2 feet, yes? So I'm not saying Moshe treats the people in that way, by the way, but when they start complaining about the food and he says to Hashem, what do you want from me, that I should have to be like I'm nursing them? They're such babies. Well, no, Hashem says, I never told you that. I never asked you to do that. That's your perception of your role. Actually, it's not your role at all. So the message is, and then what happens in this week's Hedra subsequently is, of course, we have the handover of power, right? From Moshe to Yoshua. How does that take place? Let's see. No, it's stuck. Yeah, here we go. So I'll read.
Okay.
I'll read. Go on. So he says, I will come and speak with you there, and I will take some of the spirit that is on you and place it upon them. We've learned this before, right? At the end of this week's Sedra, we have a very curious, it's one of the most amazing things. I think I heard it from Rabbi Sachs years ago. I think it's a rigid talk the Rebbe gave, comparing Korach and Eldad and Medad. Who's Eldad and Medad? No one's ever heard of them. Anyone remember who they were? Eldad and Medad are 2 chaps who appear at the end of this week's Hedra, I think. And it says they were going around the camp prophesying, saying things in Moshe's name. And Joshua says to him, Moshe, you have to stop them. These people, they're taking away from your. And Moshe says, Halavai, everyone would be a prophet. So the question is, don't understand. When Korah comes along in a few weeks' time in the Sedra and says, why do you have all the power for yourself? Give some to others. The ground opens up and swallows him. And he's a bad guy, right? When Eldad and Medad are going around, basically usurping Moshe's power, he says this is great. And the answer is there's the difference between power and influence. Power is a zero-sum game. When you give out power, you lose power. Influence is like lighting a candle for another candle. You simply spread more. So people want to go around saying teachings in Moshe's name. That's great. That's exactly what every teacher wants. Right? We don't want to share absolute power because then we lose power, but share influence 100%. So that's the difference. So God says, I will take some of the spirit that is on you and place it upon them. I will spread your influence, not take away your power. Don't make the mistake of thinking if you delegate to others, you lose your power. Right? People say, I learned a lot from my teachers, a lot from my parents or whatever, and the most from my students, right? Our students, if they succeed, it doesn't detract from us. It says, I think in the Talmud, a person is envious of everyone in this world except for their children and their students, right? So if you're a healthy person, if your child succeeds in a way beyond even your own success, then you see that as your success. They're your child, they're your progeny. It's not your failure. You shouldn't be jealous. And if your student succeeds beyond your own successes, then you've taught them well. Right, so that's how leadership works. So taking the spirit and place it upon others, and eventually, of course, upon Joshua, it's only increasing Moshe's influence. And Moshe, by the way, doesn't dispute that. So this is not about absolute power. I think it's just about a perception of having to take a parental role with the people. And God says, no, I never asked that from you. Let's see what Rabbi Sachs has to say to wrap up. Julian, over to you.
God was telling Moses that great leaders do not create followers, they create leaders. They share their inspiration. They give of their spirit to others. They do not see the people they lead as children who need a father, mother, nursemaid, but as adults who need to be educated to take individual and collective responsibility for their own future. People become what their leader gives them the space to become. When that space is large, they grow into greatness.
Right. So this idea of creating leaders, not followers. I think it's important to mention, in defense of Moshe Rabbeinu, that at the time when the people were complaining, it's very difficult to take people seriously when they're behaving like babies. So you might be a very inspirational leader who empowers your underlings, whatever they are. I don't know, people your team powers your team to be great and all the rest of it. But at times, if they behave like in a very immature way, you're probably going to feel that they're immature. So to be fair, maybe the reason Moshe says to Hashem, what do you want me to do? Nurse these people like babies? Is because they're behaving like babies. But it also seems to give us some insight into perhaps how he sees his role. Perhaps that's also why he's not so good at sharing the workload. Because he's being the parent to them, and you can't be the parent to adults. You have to let them stand on their own 2 feet. So it's some food for thought. And it's a bit shorter today. I guess it's got fewer people, so got less text. That doesn't make sense. Okay, any thoughts, anyone?